Recently, the US and the Philippines have been slamming China's construction activities in the Nansha Islands and also accused China of militarization in this area. What's your comment on that?
中方呢有关的导弹是在自己的领土上进行的，这完全是我们主权范围内的事情，无可非议，不违反任何的国际法。
China's relevant construction activities are conducted on its own territory, which is a matter entirely within the scope of sovereignty. It's justifiable as it has not violated any international law. Meanwhile, China is committed that its construction activities are mainly to improve the working and living conditions of people on the island, and at the same time to fulfill its responsibility of providing public services and goods for the international community, including maritime search and rescue, disaster prevention and mitigation, marine scientific research, meteorological observation. In addition, China's deployment of limited and necessary national defense facilities on its own territory is its exercise of self-preservation and defense, a right granted by international law to sovereign states. It has nothing to do with militarization in the South China Sea. Those countries who accused China of militarization have kept sending military vessels and bombers to the region to show off its military muscles, and China is firmly opposed to that.
The freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea is also another hot discussed topic of international concern. Could you please tell us more on that?
从中国角度来说，我们没有任何理由来不维护南海地区的航行自由。
From China's perspective, we have no reason not to safeguard freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. There is no evidence that China's activities in the South China Sea have affected the freedom of navigation and overflight of others. In fact, China is highly dependent on the route through the South China Sea. The freedom of navigation and overflight is closely related to people's livelihood, economy, and trade. How could China harm a maritime lifeline of itself? China also respects and supports other countries' freedom of navigation and overflight in accordance with the international law. However, China is firmly opposed to some countries threatening China's sovereignty and security interests under the disguise of the freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea.
所享有的在南海享有的航行和飞越自由。
Some of the countries have accused China of not respecting or abiding by the international law, especially when it comes to China's rejection of the arbitration initiated by the Philippines. And some of the countries even said that China has damaged its image as a nation safeguarding the rule of law. What would you like to respond to that?
它不是一个法律案件，现在已经演变成为了一个政治挑衅。
The Philippines' unilateral initiation of the South China Sea arbitration is not a legal issue, but rather a political provocation under the cloak of law. First, the Philippines' unilateral initiation of the arbitration without consulting with China violates the general international practice that arbitration should be agreed by disputing parties. Second, it violates a number of agreements signed with China which stand for settling the disputes through bilateral consultation and negotiations. Furthermore, it violates the declaration on the conduct of parties in the South China Sea to resolve the disputes through friendly consultations and negotiations by sovereign states directly concerned. Finally, it violates the common sense that the prerequisite of an arbitration initiation is using up all bilateral approaches. Under the right entitled in Article 298 of the Convention, China made a public statement of an optional exception in 2006 that it rejects the arbitration on the matters concerning territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. China's rejection of the arbitration initiated by the Philippines is precisely in accordance with law.
共识。